Hello, everyone. Welcome to Strengthening Indigenous and Community Rights Through Source Water Protection. My name is Brooke Atwell. I'm the Associate Director of the Resilient Watershed Strategy at the Nature Conservancy. We have a really amazing group of panelists and speakers today that are going to share their experiences, both leading conservation projects that support community-led initiatives and also being community members who are taking part in those projects. So we'll kind of get a 360 view of conservation and how source water protection can increase the rights of Indigenous people and local communities. Before we get into the content fully, we are going to hear an amazing keynote from Elizabeth Watuti, who is a multi-award-winning Kenyan environment and global climate champion and a founder of the Green Generation Initiative, which nurtures young people to love nature and be environmentally conscious at a young age. They have now planted more than 500,000 tree seedlings in Kenya. She champions youth engagement across Africa, and she is also the youngest commissioner at the Global Commission on the Economics of Water and the Nairobi Rivers Commission in Kenya. Welcome, Elizabeth.
Good morning, everyone. So my name is Elizabeth Watuti, and I'm here with the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, but I'd love to begin by highlighting some of the organizations that I work with and a little bit about the work that I do and why it's relevant to this context. So I'm the founder of the Green Generation Initiative that is working with young people across Kenya, and also in terms of greening schools and empowering young people at the grassroots levels, and also local communities to be able to build their own climate resilience. And I have also had an opportunity to work with different organizations, and I'm grateful to the Nature Conservancy because for 3 years I have been putting my time working with communities as well in Africa's First Water Fund, that's the Nairobi Water Fund, which has a network of about 185,000 farmers that are being empowered to actually restore the environment and restore their own ecosystems at the same time. And so within that context, I've had an opportunity to meet and interact with communities, with farmers, with young people, some of who I will actually share and highlight stories that have actually, been best practice and case studies that I believe the world needs to hear about. And I want to begin by painting a picture of water as a connector, because for many times, water has been seen as a sector. And yet, water flows across all our sustainable development goals, and it can actually be an organizing principle even for the policy communities that already exist. And within the Global Commission on the Economics of Water, we've been speaking about the hydrological cycle. That is actually the conversation that we should be beginning to have right now, especially when it comes to addressing the issues of water from the root causes. And as we know, the hydrological cycle moves water across the globe, connecting us and making us interdependent, across continents, across communities, and also across different ecosystems. And this is through the transboundary blue water that flows in the lakes and the rivers, but also through the green water that flows through the soil moisture and also the vapor in the air. But at the same time, we have seen the loss of wetlands, the loss of soil moisture, and deforestation actually disrupting this hydrological cycle that is the basis upon which communities and humanity thrives and survives and is able to continue doing what we do every day. And at the same time, this is also affecting our carbon sinks. And this means that it's actually accelerating global warming, reducing the availability of fresh water for consumption, for plants, and for communities at the same time. And therefore, societies as it is right now with the current business as usual can no longer rely on a stable hydrological cycle and can no longer rely on rainfall patterns that can actually be predictable. We have seen across the globe the increasing extreme droughts, the increasing extreme flooding situations. In my country, we've just come from a season where a lot of communities were greatly affected, lost their lives and livelihoods with the increasing extreme flood situation that ended up also displacing communities and displacing people from what they have known to be their home for ages. And I think this is a situation that calls us to come together and restore and stabilize the global water cycle to an extent that we understand it's actually a shared responsibility. And it's not only for a specific sector, it's not only for a specific group of people, but the entire globe needs to come together and reinvent how we govern water for the common good. And I think this shared responsibility has to transcend borders, it has to transcend disciplines, it has to transcend sectors if we are to make a difference. And the other perspective is water is very much interconnected with climate and biodiversity. And these are all sides of the same coin. And again, we cannot continue to treat it in silo, but we need to be able to see that interconnectedness and address it as it's supposed to be. And today we're here discussing the nature-based solutions. And I believe for me, this is where we also recognize the role of different actors when it comes to enabling us to stabilize our water cycles, but at the same time when it comes to leading nature-based solutions. Indigenous communities, for instance, they make up less than 7% of the global population, but they are the same people that are conserving more than 80% of the remaining biodiversity in the world. And this is something that tells us that we must not only recognize this, but we must strengthen their capacity to continue doing that which they do best and that which they have already been doing for ages, which we are now discussing today. But it's important that we have an opportunity to begin this conversation and catalyze it to an aspect where everybody plays a role and an integral role within the space. And I have seen the role of communities work in very different ways. And I just want to paint a picture of one community that I've had an opportunity to work with also through the Water Fund, and that's the community in Solio. That is a community that used to live in the forest and was resettled in a place that was actually completely dry, an arid and semi-arid area. And this is a place that nobody would ever think that anything would grow out of it. And in fact, when these communities were brought to this land, most of them felt that there was no hope within that place. So a lot of them sold the land and they left. But those who stayed still embodied their values that they had of conserving the place and restoring it to the initial state. And they continued to grow trees across the same land. They continued to find ways of how they could survive within that same land. And they have been able to actually find ways to also conserve the nearby water catchment areas. And as we speak today, this community is actually now a thriving green village that is sustaining the community. It's created its own microclimate. The communities can now harvest their own rainwater through the water ponds, and also they're able to propagate millions of seedlings that now go to restore the water catchment areas that neighbor them. But most importantly for me, what I saw was a story of resilience, a story of communities being able to use their knowledge, their traditions, their understanding within that space to create an environment where they can be able to thrive and survive at the same time. And right now, anybody who visits that community cannot believe that it was actually a bare land. And I think for me, that is the direction that we should be taking. How do we support and empower local action that has been going on for ages? And how do we make sure that we actually support the scaling up of some of these initiatives that we talk about in these forums? And also in my work at the Green Generation Initiative, I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of young people, and mostly in terms of ensuring that they can bring their ideas, their perspectives, and their innovations within the space. Because most of the times when we talk about inclusion in these spaces, it has most often been misunderstood to mean just having the voice, which is okay, but it has to go beyond to make sure that we recognize every person as a stakeholder who brings a meaningful contribution into the space. And so for us, it has mostly been how do we empower the young people to be able to build up their ideas, their innovation, and their solutions at the local level, and then use that to also influence policy at the global scale. And we've been working with hundreds of schools across Kenya, trying to get them to green their own spaces, and at the same time, trying to support them to build their own resilience, especially in terms of food security. Because with the rising impacts of climate change, we know that a lot of these schools as well do not have access to, let alone clean drinking water, but they don't even have access to the water itself. And I think for us, it's purely about how we can be able to support these communities to build their own microclimates at the same time, and then be able to package these stories in a way that we're able to push for more action at the global stage, to get more stakeholders to come together and understand that while the local action is happening, it's not gonna work a lot if we don't have global collective action as well, where different sectors are also looking at how their actions negatively contribute to affecting these communities, and at the same time, how our collective action now could actually speed up and catalyze the action that we talk about every day. And so we've also been able to work with young people, especially the community-based organizations, trying to empower them as well to restore their nearby water catchment areas in a way that they can also inspire and educate their communities about what the problem is, but not only what the problem is, but what solutions can we be able to undertake, because we've realized that bringing in the community approach of people working together, then people are able to exchange knowledge, exchange ideas, and then they're able to move together collectively to do what is supposed to be done. And I think for me, three things that I think would work within the space. One is, like I mentioned, we must reimagine water governance at all the levels, not just one level, local level, regional level, global level, across sectors, across disciplines. If we do not reimagine this, then it's going to be difficult for us to even achieve any of the sustainable development goals that we are trying to achieve. And at the same time, it will be difficult for us to meet any of the targets that we are looking at in the policy space, including the climate targets and the biodiversity targets. And then secondly, we need to look at how we reinvent our water partnerships and what we are calling the just water partnerships. And for me, a just water partnership is one that also embodies the principles of intergenerational, equity and justice, looking at how we're addressing the challenges today, but how are we prepared for the challenges of the future, and how are we making sure that we are looking beyond, because our children and our young people are going to live in this planet and inherit that which we are creating today. So is that just? Is it fair? Is it equitable? Is it something that can actually enable them to continue thriving in the space? And of course, it's also about inclusion. Who else are we not putting on the table? Are we involving and making sure that the inclusion is actually supporting, the scale up and bringing the innovations, the ideas, the voices in the same way that we can be able to co-create and co-design everything together. And lastly, the aspect of knowledge sharing. I believe for us to be able to get people to care about water, we need to begin having these conversations in all the platforms that we get, in all the opportunities that we get, and we need to be able to package it in a way that every person understands that water is actually our lifeline. And without being able to protect this critical ecosystem and this critical natural asset, then we will be able to support life on Earth. I think for me that is very critical, that we scale that down, decentralize information, decentralize resources to scale up what's already existing, and work together collectively. Because if we don't work together collectively, again, we will not be able to achieve our targets. And I think just to end, is just to urge all of us, we need to work together, for water, because water connects us all. And anything that connects us all calls us to just come together and, bring our innovations, our solutions, and everything that it takes to drive the action with the urgency that it needs. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much, Elizabeth. I really appreciate the inspiring call to action, and especially the importance of local interventions that you raised, and sort of this decentralization of knowledge, and really the power of stewardship is what you were highlighting there. And so that's an excellent transition into what we're going to be talking about today, and hearing many of the stories from teams on the ground. All right. We'll roll with it for right now. Okay, so today we're going to be setting the stage a little bit to hear about sort of the dual crises, the water climate crises that we're facing today. So most of you know these stats. With climate change, drought will affect more than 75% of the world's population by 2025, and alongside that, biodiversity is unfortunately crashing at an alarming rate. This graph that you're seeing here is from WWF's Living Planet Index, and it notes that we're seeing declines across terrestrial, oceanic, and freshwater biodiversity, but as you can see, freshwater is over double the losses that we're seeing in terrestrial and oceanic ecosystems. The same source watersheds that provide water for all of our communities, our industry, and our food are also home to incredible biodiversity. So when we think of source watersheds and why we're working there, it's because they are the intersection of water supply that we need to survive. As Elizabeth said, all life on Earth relies on this. And it's also a critical overlap for the majority of the biodiversity loss that we're seeing. When we think about the potential opportunity then, so if we're focusing on source watersheds, we can look at where can nature have a cost-effective impact on water supply. And so the dots that you're seeing on this map here, the orange and the yellow dots, are areas where water supply or investment in nature-based solutions could be offset by savings in water treatment costs alone. So that doesn't account for any co-benefits like biodiversity, climate mitigation, adaptation. It's just purely savings in water treatment costs. And that stat is about 1 in 6 cities could see a positive return on their investment through nature-based solutions. So when we talk about nature-based solutions, we're talking about a whole slew of things. This is a packaging and a classification of things that Indigenous people and local communities have been doing for years. We've just decided to package it now in a way that is, quote unquote, replicable and understandable by Western science, if you will. But really, we're just taking lessons learned from people who have been doing this for generations. And so when we think about the potential for co-benefits of nature-based solutions, as we move towards sort of the protection, restoration, management, and created habitats, if you move up the scale more towards protection and restoration, where you're restoring the natural functioning of the ecosystems, the potential for co-benefits, especially around biodiversity and mitigation, are far greater. The reason why we're also focused on source watersheds is because there are payers who are interested in paying for that water. And therefore, they may be interested in capitalizing on this cross-section between areas that supply our water and areas that protect our biodiversity. So this massive bar that you see here on the left of the screen is annual water infrastructure investment. And that teeny tiny, barely imperceptible bar at the bottom, I don't think it even makes a blip, is what is actually spent annually on nature-based solutions for water security. If we were to just allocate 1% of that scary green bar to nature-based solutions, it would actually eclipse all spending on philanthropic spending on conservation combined. That's the size of the opportunity that we have to redirect to biodiversity in these source watersheds, and importantly, redirect it to the communities who are often protecting and restoring and managing those watersheds and ecosystems. So what you see here is the typical watershed investment program development cycle, all the way from feasibility to execution. And the green bars there is usually where traditionally Indigenous people and local communities have showed up. They're either implementers of nature-based solutions, they might benefit from the nature-based solutions, and occasionally they might be brought in to consult on design. That is the absolute wrong way to do things, and we need to make a shift where community, indigenous leadership and decision making is brought through the entirety of the process and even begins before a project is designed, conceptualized at the very beginning, so that their needs, their knowledge is taken into account and is really driving the process. They should be the owners of these programs. And so today we're going to hear some of these key themes that are brought out. So when we talk about, why Indigenous people and local communities, we're really talking about the deep knowledge and experience that's been accumulated over generations. They know what it takes to get the job done, and because they've been doing it for generations, they thought of new ways of doing things that we, who are entering a space for the first time, can't conceive. There's operational efficiencies that we could capitalize on, and that is really what drives much of the scale and an opportunity for nature-based solutions. They also have long-term sustainable stewardship. So often NGOs like the Nature Conservancy, we invest for a few years in one place. We might invest pretty deeply for 10 to 20 years, but ultimately, do we want to be the long-term stewards of that land? No. We want Indigenous people and local communities to be the long-term stewards of that land, and the Nature Conservancy can step out and help others to capacitate and do the exact same thing. They also have integrated approaches across multi-sector solutions. So instead of entering, as Elizabeth was saying, from the water sector, it's integrated across education and food security and climate mitigation and adaptation. And that's just something that, Western science hasn't really begun to do particularly well, if I'm going to be honest. And then two pieces that I think are really important is that while long-term legislative change to codify the rights to access, use, manage resources is the ultimate goal, that can often take a really long time. There are existing processes that we can tap into, like river basin authorities, river basin management plans, regulatory reform that can direct tariff funding towards a pipeline of solutions that could be used to codify the rights for Indigenous people to manage their lands. And I think that's often an underutilized leverage that we should be spending more time kind of integrating in process. And then importantly, that big, huge green bar that you saw on the other screen, watershed investment programs that really codify collective action and really push that towards large-scale watershed conservation programs, they're about redirecting that 1% to long-term stewards of the land. So community members that we can upscale the work that they're already doing instead of onerous, at least in the United States, it's very onerous applications for government grants that take years, and often there's not grant writers, there's not people there to support that. And so is there any way that we can make it easier and shuttle more money to programs that are already high functioning? So with that setting of the stage, I'm going to introduce some of our speakers for today. We're going to hear from John Wakanda first. So John is the New Mexico chapter's first ever Indigenous Partnerships Program Manager. He actually came out of retirement for this job because he said that there's too much work to do. We very much appreciate him for that. John is a citizen of the Isleta Pueblo, and he is responsible for developing deep collaboration with the tribes in New Mexico to find new ways to expand their sovereignty over their traditional lands and waters, not only those recognized by the federal U.S. government. We will then hear from Girija Godbol, who spearheads the Nature Conservancy's source water protection program in the Gode River Basin in the Western Ghats of Maharashtra state. She has over 20 years of experience in the environment and development sector and is passionate about bringing gender equity to the forefront in India. We will also hear from Gabriela Celi, who is the Ecuadorian Amazon Strategy Coordinator at the Nature Conservancy. Gabriela has over a decade of experience in managing conservation projects focused on forest and freshwater ecosystems, collaborating with public, private institutions, and academia, as well as partnering with Indigenous nations and local communities in the Ecuadorian Amazon. And then we will hear from Diana Vargas. She is a Quechua woman from Pastaza and is a member of the Comuna San Jacinto del Pindo. She holds a master's degree in regional and community planning and specialization in indigenous planning. She is part of the Institute of Indigenous Planning and Design at the University of New Mexico, and her areas of interest include territorial planning, education, and social justice. As the leader of international affairs and organizations at Paquiru, her mission is to coordinate actions in the territory between partners, NGO, and public institutions. She aims for Pastaza to be an example of how interculturality can be practiced in public policy. John, we will start with you.
Thank you, Brooke, for your great introduction and your wonderful overview of the work that we are embarking on and the importance of it and what we are trying to achieve. Good day, everyone. Thank you for your interest. We have a great attendance here, which I really appreciate your interest in learning a little bit about what we do and how we're hoping to impact and strengthen our Indigenous participation, knowledge, and ability to protect our communities, protect our sovereignty, protect our culture, rights, and values through our work in water. As a little bit of introduction, as Brooke said, I am from the Pueblo of Isleta, which is in New Mexico in the United States. Just to give you an overview, it's in New Mexico, the southwest part of the country, very arid, very dry. You know, our annual rainfall is probably 15 inches at most per year. Very, very dry. And my people, my ancestors, I'm very fortunate to be able to live at the place where I was born, where my parents were born, where their parents were born, and generations of connection to a place, connection to the land, connection to everything. You know, nature is who we are. We are not a separate entity. We're not distinct. We're not dominant over nature. We are part of nature. Just also as part of my introduction, my Pueblo name in the Tiwa language is Ebathe. And I don't expect any of you to recognize that or recall that, but I'll just do a little bit of translation for you. Picture yourself in a area where there is a mountain, stream, forest, clear water, flowing, cold, crisp, and you look at the water, and there may be some rocks or pebbles, stones on the floor of the river. You see a reflection from the bottom. The light hitting the river, shiny, sparkly, the reflection that comes from above. That's my name. And that's given to you when you're a child and born in a traditional way. We go to our kiva, our traditional healers, medicine people, the keepers of our protection. Those are the ones who are allowed to give you that name and bestow you with protection, the knowledge, the ability for you to grow and learn and experience life. And that was given to me, and I'm very proud of that. And happy to be here and happy to share my experiences with all of you in hopes to achieve what Brooke mentioned is our goals. I'm very fortunate to be part of the Nature Conservancy. I joined about 3 years ago in New Mexico in the Indigenous Partnerships Program area. I feel very fortunate to work in that capacity. I do have to mention that I retired from civil service, the United States government. I worked for the federal government for 32 years for the Bureau of Indian Affairs. That's the federal agency that maintains or holds trust responsibility over indigenous people in the United States. Many of you might be aware of the colonization, domination of Native people in the United States, where we were captive and given through treaties, through various agreements, the ability to live in your ancestral lands or a place identified for that particular people to reside. Reservations were created, and then an obligation by the federal government to take care of you, take care of the land, to take care of the resources, so that you have a place and that'll be yours, and that becomes your home. It's a dominant society. It's a domination action, centuries, and so we can't change that, however, right now, but we're learning in ways in which to empower ourselves and strengthen our sovereignty, strengthen our ability to govern ourselves, maybe eliminate the federal responsibility someday and show and prove that we are capable of managing ourselves. That is my goal, and that's why I continue to work in this arena. I am fortunate to have been introduced to the waterfront concept, and I'll show you a little bit about what we are doing in New Mexico with my people and my pueblos and my communities, with the hopes of protecting water for ourselves, but also being able to use investment funding coming from entities outside our reservations, industry, the municipalities that require clean drinking water. Some of our reservation lands are the headwaters of the Rio Grande River, which you see, which flowing from north to south in New Mexico. Many of our tribal lands are responsible for managing the forest lands and higher elevations, whereby the water flows down into the river and feeds the Rio Grande River, and people live outside the reservation and use the water. You can see this. I don't expect you to be able to read that, but it shows the concept of what we have in New Mexico, where water is collected, received in the wintertime, winter precipitation in the form of snow in the higher elevations, falls in the forested areas. Many of our tribes and pueblo lands, tribal lands, are in those areas. We are responsible for taking care of that resource. We do a very good job of that. My background is in forest management, wildfire protection. I've been doing that for many years, and that's where my career started. So I've been in the arena of restoration and protection and conservation of water for many years. This is a little bit of where I live. That's the goals of our water fund, how we do that. This is a picture of the Pueblo of Asleta. Very fortunate to have a diversion dam, irrigation diversion dam, that then provides water in the Rio Grande Valley to our tribal farmers. Been doing that for many years. This is the area about 100 years ago. Our Pueblo community, very socially connected, looking after each other. This is who we are. We settled in this area, farmed in this area, traditional agriculture. That's how we survived. You look at a picture taken years ago. The one in color is current day. Nothing's changed. Our people live the same way, and that's what we want. We don't want things to change any differently. Very strong tradition, culture, songs, dances, language are still the same as they have been for years. The women, they are the collectors of water to the river, carrying it in the pottery. We can't drink that water anymore. It's not clean. These are our Pueblo farmers, very proud people, very happy to provide food for our people. We continue that today, although we don't do that manually and as intensively as in the past. We have machinery, it's mechanized and highly developed, although we're very proud that we're continuing that agriculture lifestyle. Our dances, our religion, one in the past, color currently, still value, pray, protection, water, ceremonies, done every day. You know, there are people in our community that is their role. That is their purpose in life, is to continue that tradition and culture. It's passed on to the younger generations, and I'm very happy to see the youth here. you represent our future. You are the ones that are going to continue this. You're going to keep this alive, and the Water Fund is collecting funds that allow us to do this. It's part of my responsibility to show that we are capable, that we are empowered, that we have the ability to do this, to care for our communities. And we can go on and on about how the Water Fund provides technical assistance and help to us. It's our own indigenous knowledge to be able to promote that as we see it, continue it in our schools. We're sponsoring education programs in our elementary schools about caring for the environment, being able to carry on this lifestyle for years and years. And it's to protect places like this. These are on our reservations, on our tribal lands. Many of you may not have the ability to visit tribal lands, but through our water funds, just know that investing in these programs and projects are empowering us to practice our tradition, culture, and sovereignty. It's something that we have to do. Without this, we're not going to survive. There's nowhere for us to go. This is our place. This is our land. We don't want to go anywhere else. We have no thoughts of going anywhere else. This is who we are as people and what we do. This is our agriculture today. This is how we practice it. I'm very happy that my hands are dirty every day. I'm a farmer. I raise livestock. I don't want to change, and I shouldn't change. I'll close with the slide here. I think the measure of a civilization is not how tall its concrete buildings are, but rather how well its people have learned to relate to their environment and their fellow man. That's who we are, and so thank you very much for this opportunity.
Namaste, Jai Bhim, and Johar. After that wonderful speech, let me take you to another part of the world, India this time. So I'm going to share some of the experiences of the work that we are doing in the western part of India in the Source Basin Protection Project in partnership with the indigenous communities. And just to add, if you hear me speak, say tribal communities, I mean indigenous communities. Because in India, we usually use the term tribal communities. So just in case I use that word, I wanted to clarify that. Right. So before I speak about our area, give more information about where we are working, I think first I would like to share some of the quotes from our tribal friends, our indigenous community friends. So this resonates very well with what John said, that the indigenous communities in our area also typically say that they know how to live with nature. So that's how their ancestors have been living. But I must also say here that the younger generation, you do see quite a few changes, and their aspirations may not be the same as their elders. So many of them have also migrated to the cities and would want to live in a different way. So I just wanted to put that. Another quote by another of our friend from the village. You see this quite often in some parts, that women have so much of knowledge, but their knowledge is often not recognized because they don't have the formal education. And this is what she's also saying. We also often see that women don't get the chances to have the opportunity to use the maps or other technical information. And through our work, we are trying to change that. Right. So this is about the area where we are working. The Watershed falls in the Western Ghats mountains in Western India. This is part of the northern Western Ghats. And this is where the Ghod River, where we are working, it originates. And it's quite a large watershed, large basin, as you can see. It also a source of water for millions of people. And also we have cluster of industries in the lower part of the basin. So in the upper part, you have typically the indigenous communities. In the middle part, you have larger farmer communities. And lower basin, again, you have larger farmers and the industries, and more like peri-urban sort of areas. Right. Some of the challenges that we are seeing in this area is we have quite a few dams there, and the indigenous communities have lost their land because of the construction of these dams. Then groundwater depletion is another major issue in this area. You have increasing water demand, and which has reduced the reverse flows, of course. Then the key water security challenges are sediment retention, then flood risk, and also dry season flows. We see that nature-based solutions can offer an opportunity to change some of this, and that's what we are doing in partnership with the indigenous communities. One of the challenges also is the diversity. You have diverse groups living in the same area, and as you know, they have different socio-economic status, their political clout is different, so it adds to the problems sometimes. So as I said, the diverse stakeholders are there. As some of you might know, India has the caste hierarchy, which is one of the longest social stratification systems in the world, perhaps. Some say it's around 3,000 years old. And it's assigned by birth. So you are born into a caste by your birth. You can't change that. And typically, the indigenous communities are seen to be outside of the caste system. But even within the indigenous communities, there's a lot of diversity, there's a lot of hierarchy. Maybe not so explicit, but we often see this in our work. Also, there is a lot of disparity in the land ownership and the other resources. And this is even within the indigenous communities. You have some communities who don't own land at all, and there are communities who have quite a large chunk of land. So there is a lot of disparity there as well. Then some of the communities, some of the caste communities, like the former untouchable caste, they have social stigma. But even within the tribal communities, the indigenous communities, there are certain communities who have this sort of stigma. And that adds an additional challenge when we work. And currently in my state, in Maharashtra, the political situation is really challenging. There are a lot of breaking down of parties, and so there's a bit of a turmoil, which adds another challenge to our work. So this was just to give you some local context. In our work, as I said, we are partnering with the indigenous communities. And even among the indigenous communities, we are very keen to work with the women. This area is, as many other areas in India, is quite patriarchal. The patriarchal values guide the patterns of behavior, the norms. And so women are not are not freely interacting with men, for example. This area is much better than some parts of India, but still there are a lot of restrictions. The level of literacy among women is not so high, especially in the indigenous communities that we are working with. Then a lot of household responsibilities that women face. I'm sure this is quite similar to other parts of the world as well. And also the lack of knowledge that they have. The knowledge they have, there's a lack of recognition. So it's not often recognized as knowledge. So for example, women will have information about various plants, about water sources, but because they don't have the formal education or the technical kind of background, it's not often recognized as knowledge. And we are sort of trying to change it with discussing with women, with discussing with men as well, trying to tell them how important this knowledge is. So these are some of the activities we have been typically doing. In our work, we are also trying to seek out the traditional knowledge. So for example, there are a lot of sacred forests, sacred water sources. So we are trying to get more information from the indigenous communities and try to incorporate that in the planning of our activities in the project. So basically we are trying really hard and consciously to involve women. And if you have any suggestions, it would be really useful because we are in the beginning stage of the project. So I think I'll stop here because I have a couple of videos, really short ones. Can we play those? Okay.
नमस्कार, मी शशिकांत दल्लाट, गोड वॉटर फंड महाराष्ट्र यामध्ये मी काम करतो. विकास कामामध्ये लोकांच्या सहभागाच्या दृष्टिकोनातून विचार करत असताना मला असं वाटतं की स्थानिक लोकांचं जर या सर्व विकास कामामध्ये जर पार्टिसिपेशन असेल आणि छोट्या छोट्या गोष्टींमध्ये जर त्यांचा सहभाग असेल तर ते काम अधिक सस्टेन, क्वालिटी आणि क्वांटिटीच्या दृष्टिकोनातून अतिशय चांगल्या पद्धतीने म्हणजे दर्जेदार पद्धतीनं होतं असा माझा अनुभव आहे. लोकांचा सहभाग हा अतिशय महत्त्वाचा का असतो तर स्थानिक लोकांना तिथल्या परिस्थितीचं चांगल्या पद्धतीचं ज्ञान असतं. भौगोलिक परिस्थिती असेल, सामाजिक परिस्थिती असेल, एखादं काम करत असताना तिथे त्या पद्धतीने कुठल्या पद्धतीनं चांगलं करावं जेणेकरून ते काम करण्यास अधिक सोपं होईल या दृष्टिकोनातून त्यांचे विचार अतिशय महत्त्वाचे असतात. खास करून आदिवासी बहुल म्हणजे ट्रायबल झोनमध्ये काम करत असताना स्थानिक आदिवासी लोकांना बरेच पारंपरिक ज्ञान असतं. अशा ज्ञानाचा उपयोग करून आपण आपल्या प्रकल्पामध्ये त्याचा उपयोग कसा पद्धतीने करून घेऊ शकतो हेही खूप महत्त्वाचं आहे. उदाहरणार्थ आम्ही या प्रकल्पांतर्गत हिरडा या वनस्पतीची सगळ्यात जास्त लागवड केली, कारण हिरडा गोळा करण्यापासून तर हिरड्याच्या प्रक्रियेपर्यंत या लोकांना चांगल्या पद्धतीचं ज्ञान होतं आणि लोकांनी त्या दृष्टिकोनातून हिरडा उत्पादनाच्या दृष्टिकोनातून या वनस्पतीला अतिशय जास्त महत्त्व दिलं. नियोजनाचा भाग असेल किंवा अंमलबजावणी इम्प्लिमेंटेशनचं असेल, या सर्व प्रक्रियेमध्ये लोकांचा सहभाग घेतल्यामुळे त्यांची एक स्वतःची कॅपॅसिटी बिल्डिंग झाली की हे काम आपलं आहे. ओनरशिप त्यांच्याकडे गेल्यामुळं त्या कामामध्ये अधिक चांगल्या पद्धतीचं एक वातावरण निर्माण झालं आणि काम करत असताना या कामामध्ये अडचणी कमी आल्या आणि लोकांचा सहभाग जास्त वाढला गेला. तर अशा दृष्टिकोनातून आपण एखादा प्रकल्प हाती घेत असताना त्या प्रकल्पाअंतर्गत जर स्थानिक लोकांचा सहभाग जास्त असेल तर मला वाटतं ते काम अधिक चांगल्या पद्धतीनं आणि योग्य पद्धतीनं पुढे जात असतं. याच्यामध्ये लोकांची पार्टनरशिप जी आहे ती मला असं वाटतं की अधिक वाढवण्यासाठी लोकांना प्रकल्प अधिक चांगल्या पद्धतीनं समजून सांगणं आणि त्याचबरोबर लोकांना त्या प्रकल्पाच्या बाजूनं घेणं जेणेकरून त्या प्रकल्पाचं यश मला असं वाटतं की ते त्यावर टिकून असतं. आपण प्रकल्प सोडल्यानंतर म्हणजे एखाद्या गावामध्ये आपण प्रकल्पाचं काम थांबवल्यानंतर त्या लोकांकडे जर त्या प्रकल्पाची ओनरशिप गेली तर ते काम अधिक सस्टेन होईल असं मला नक्कीच वाटतं.
So basically he's talking about how involving the communities is very important, and that's what he's been doing in our work. He's one of our sorry. So he spoke about the importance of involving the communities, and he also spoke about the traditional knowledge that we have been using in our work. So for example, he gave one example of the minor forest produce, Terminalia species, and how the knowledge of the local communities helped us to select the spots while planting those, and also while collection of the fruit, how important it was to involve them because it was much more effective when the people were involved. And also how important it is that the people are there right from the beginning so that the feeling of ownership develops. And when you exit from any village, then the people take over. So that's what he spoke about. Right, so yeah. No, thank you so much.
So thank you, Brooke, for the opportunity to being here, sharing the experience of Ecuador, implementing some projects or initiatives focused on freshwater conservation. Collaborative efforts in Ecuador have produced recent examples of effective, large-scale and inclusive freshwater conservation and water security mechanism. I'm going to talk about two innovative protection schemes supported by the Nature Conservancy in the Ecuadorian Amazon region. The first one is related to the water protection areas that aims the protection of water sources and freshwater ecosystems. These areas are crucial for ensuring water security, food sovereignty, maintaining biodiversity, cultural and spiritual values regarding human and nature rights. These areas are established to safeguard the quantity and quality of water resources, which are important for human consumption and ecological health. Since 2022, the Nature Conservancy has supported the Ministry of Environment of Ecuador to declare 5 water protection areas, representing more than 100,000 hectares of land protected and more than 2,000 kilometers of rivers, considering the importance for the communities to maintain water provision for their future generations. TNC is facilitating the development of the technical management plan and the definition of the governance model, where communities are the main stakeholders. Regarding to maintain the protection of freshwater ecosystems for the long term and respecting indigenous rights to have access to clean and sufficient water, the Ministry of Environment and the communities will implement the management plans and define the sustainable financial mechanism for ensuring protection of water sources for the long term. And here you can see some examples. Here you can see the zoning map. The zoning map was defined in general assemblies. The zoning map identifies the conservation areas, the sustainable management areas, and the places that are important for communities because are considered sacred places. Also, TNC is supporting the development of strategies that were established in a participatory way. So TNC provides some tools to collect data and promote the transmission of the cultural practices between generations. Here you can see some activities where women, men, elders, and young people from communities have participated. And another example of freshwater community-led protection is an initiative led by 2 Ecuadorian indigenous nations, the Guarani and the Quichua indigenous nation of Pastaza. Diana Chavez, who will be participating in this panel, belongs to Paquiru, a strong indigenous organization that manages more than 1 million hectares of the Ecuadorian Amazon region. The Amazon still has an important percentage of free-flowing rivers, but not yet protected. This region has threats such as dams, hydropowers, roads, and deforestation. All these threats can disrupt river connectivity and affect the health of the system. The Nusinho, Curaray, and Villano rivers provide fundamental ecosystem services. As part of people's livelihood, free-flowing rivers provide food security through fisheries for community subsistence. The initiative aims to maintain the river connectivity of the Curaray, which is a tributary of the Napo River that flows to the big Amazon River. So TNC has given technical assistance and financial support to identify the enabling conditions and determine the best legal option for the official designation, and also has been facilitated participatory workshops to collect social, economic, environmental, and territorial data for a better understanding of this socio-ecological and cultural system. As you know, free, prior, and informed consent is an important right for indigenous peoples, according to the national and international law. During the consultation process, communication material was designed and translated into local languages. Community leaders organize the assemblies and meetings, and they help us to translate the message into local languages. At the end of the process, 79 communities accept to be part of this initiative. They decide what they want to do into their territories. Based on the free, prior, and informed consent, 1 year ago, the Guarani and the Quichua indigenous nations signed an auto-declaration of the fluvial reserve as a community-led freshwater conservation area. At the end of the year, both indigenous nations with the technical support of TNC will be finishing the preparation of the management plan that includes a proposal for the governance model and sustainable finance strategies. Communities have identified some conservation and livelihood strategies. For example, the creation of a community-based monitoring system focused on water quality and freshwater biodiversity. Other strategies are aligned with the community-led fisheries model to improve the management of the fluvial system. So at this moment, I want to pass the floor to Diana Chavez, who will be sharing her perspective of indigenous people rights and water protection.
Hello. I don't have a presentation, but I guess I'm going to support some of the work that TNC has been doing in Ecuador, and at least with us. We just signed, right? Every year we sign, like, and review the agreement that we have with them, which is one of the nicest steps, because as an organization, you recognize that indigenous people are organized, and of course we, as part of the council, having elected in a democratic, in our own ways, by the indigenous community. That should be one of the first rights, when you acknowledge who are the leaders and you support these organizations too, to give us a voice and be part of this self-determination right. The other thing is, yes, I want to focus on the prior and prior consent, because what TNC did was to consult in every community, which is sometimes happens that they just make a huge, usually what is done is make a huge assembly and you just delegate some people, not everyone is there. But this time TNC, they took the time and did the consultation in every community. So I'm here also to support that process, and also to let you know, like, that's a great idea. When you're planning, please make that time, plan from that time too. So now you are sure that everyone is on board of the project that you are going to implement. The other thing, when we were talking about, we are just waiting for the management plan that TNC is helping us to write. It's to be part of that plan at the beginning. Of course, sometimes there is not the capacity to at least to write all the plan, but to be part of what you are writing. So TNC, what has been done is share with us, like in 3 parts, what they are writing. We as a council have made some input in that book, which is also, we are certain of what is going to be there, and if it is in our best interest. So right now we're just waiting for that also to finalize, because the other thing is talking about rights. We have these assemblies to share this and to be validated. This is one of the processes that, again, takes time, but if you want to get things done in a good way, this is one of the ways. So after we have all the book, we have to go to an assembly and show to everyone what is there, the results, the maps, the main points, so people has to agree on that. If they do not agree on that, so we give it back to TNC and say, hey, we need to change this, or it's better if you put this in this way. So yesterday, the people that were or have been in some of the spaces that I have been talking, I was saying this, so please take the time. Our time as indigenous people is very different than the Western time. And sometimes the projects, you just make projects for 1 year and it has to be done quickly, and you just have a timeline. Your timeline should be in our own terms as indigenous people, and please take that in account too. And I guess I'm not gonna be talk a lot, because I know that we are going to be here and have some, I have some questions, right? You are going to give some questions, and we would like to talk with you and share also and exchange some knowledge, and then have this time, because these spaces are very good for us to exchange our knowledge. That's all. Yeah.
Actually, you all should. All right. With that transition, we have a couple questions for the panel, but we do want to make this an open discussion as well. So if you have any questions or want to share your own experiences, that would be particularly helpful, so we can start opening up a dialogue. So John, I think I'm going to start with you, if that's all right. Excellent. So as you had alluded to in your presentation, the concept of nature-based solutions is not new. You know, we call it NBS now, but Indigenous people and local communities have really been practicing what people are now classifying as NBS for generations. It's just really a packaging of responsible stewardship. So one of the largest criticisms of nature-based solutions is that there's not enough evidence of their impacts, but we've just mentioned that Indigenous people have been practicing nature-based solutions for generations. And so how do you envision maybe that we can bridge this gap, kind of elevate the evidence base and the proof and the experience that Indigenous people and local communities hold, so that we can activate more funding and mobilize it to people who are actually doing the work?
Thank you, Brooke. That is a very good question. I would go back to what Diana mentioned about is the example of empowering and giving the responsibility of Indigenous people and communities the opportunity to develop their own plans, to be able to come together and organize themselves to be able to develop their own identifiable, their own distinct plans. And in the United States, for tribes, you know, our resource management plans have been mandated or required by the federal government, and funding has been flowing through that process for many years. Let's break that system. Let's show that we are capable of obtaining funds. May not have to come from the government. It could be leveraged with government funds, yes, or used in combination, but practice our sovereignty, practice our rights to be able to develop our own plans the way we want, that address the priorities and challenges of our distinct communities, and not have the government or authorities tell us what our plan should look like and be, you know, adopted by our own tribal governments. Turn that around. Flip that around to where we're going to develop our plans, and the government, this is what we accept, this is what we want. You know, that to me is addressing our immediate needs in the fashion, in the way, could be in our traditional languages, could be, you know, elevated through our own process of tribal sovereignty, whereby our own communities and our governance systems, it could be traditional governments, could be our traditional authorities are recognized in that manner. Just totally flip that around from a top-down approach to a bottom-up approach, whereby it allows us to develop our own capacity, show our knowledge, recognize our language, recognize our own abilities to manage or to govern ourselves in the way we see.
Thank you, John. That's actually a great transition, because I'm going to pass if you can pass the mic to Diana, yes. So you have a background in Indigenous planning. And so for our audience members who are maybe not as familiar with that concept, could you maybe share more about what that entails, and then maybe how you're applying that in practice in Pastaza?
Thank you. First I would like to acknowledge the people that I learned from, my mentor, Ted Jojola from New Mexico. and acknowledge also, I feel so humbled to be part of this and saying what I'm going to say now. And this is because I'm going to start first for where this comes from. The indigenous planning comes from the 7th-generation model. And if you want to plan, and we should do this for everything that we do in our lives. If you want to do a planning, you need to try to think that you are in the middle and think about 3 generations in your past and plan also for 3 generations in your future. Knowing that maybe that what you are planning, you are not going to see it finished, but you are going to do whatever is in your power to get done. That means that, and you mentioned, we have a responsibility. Indigenous people have, we born with that responsibility for us, our land. We talk about land tenure and not about the Western way of thinking land as an economic gain. Everything looks like if you don't have a gain on that, seems that you are not going to pay it. When I say you, I mean the Western, just in case I'm not pointing fingers. You are not seeking a value for something that for us and indigenous people, land, we cannot put a amount of money for our land. It's it's hard for us to think in that way. So that's indigenous planning. That's the 7th-generation model. That is, of course, different because, as I said, the Western planning always prioritizing that economic gain. We, as indigenous, what we want to do is plan, but thinking in the long term, of course, to sustain our culture and sustain our land, right? So that's how we want it to be planned. And I like that you mentioned sometimes of these important books, reports are made from people from outside, okay? So we need to be more sure that the community is there. We are using community participatory methods. As Gabriela said, that you at least try to have someone that translate in the same language and or have materials, it's reading in the language of the indigenous people. And for you to keep, I would like to share these principles that I learned also when I was learning. And let me just make this as an example. How many of you have known or seen the pyramids in Mexico? Can you raise your hand? Okay, okay. What about the pyramids in Egypt? Okay. Machu Picchu in Peru? Okay. Yeah, looks like most of have seen this huge structure, right? Just try to think this for a moment. To build that took centuries. They weren't done in 10 years, 20 years. It took centuries. Just try to imagine the architect was building, right? He made the plans, the first architect made the plans, and started building it. He died, of course, and then came a new architect. Just try to imagine the new architect saying, oh, no, this is wrong. Let's move this, let's change this. Don't do it here in this place, let's move it. Can you try to imagine that? No, right? So please keep that in mind. That's how, and we indigenous people have been planning for millennia, centuries, and maybe the Western thinking has been on top of us, but it's there. We have this way of planning that maybe hasn't been brought or is not knowledge for everyone, but it's there. And please, when you plan everything that you're planning, just try to think in that way. So let me just finish this, sharing with you these principles that I humble also learned. People try in community settings. We need to empower the people that are there in the communities because we, the engineers, the architects, we are not the expert. They are the experts in the community and they have the answers for the problems. Of course, we need to empower them and give them this the space to practice the self-determination because, of course, we have the right to determine our own future. We need to be also humble and acknowledge the oppression that has been done in our communities. So please, when we go there, if you go there to the indigenous communities, don't judge. Try to acknowledge this oppression that is still happening. This colonial system is still there, and you need to acknowledge that. And of course, people are already beautiful and capable of decide the future and do things. Yeah, that's all.
Thank you, Diana. You're done. So for the sake of time, I'm sorry, Gabby and Kavija, we're going to open it up to the audience. Does anybody have any questions or experiences from their own practices that they'd like to share? Don't be shy.
Thank you. My name is Karen Steehouwer. I work for the Netherlands government on a program that's called Reversing the Flow, in which we apply the principles of locally led adaptation. Actually, I'm impressed by the examples being shared, and I want to focus just on a small example that you referred to, and it was about the relationship with TNC and I think your program you're working on, that it is being renewed on a yearly basis. One of the principles of locally led adaptation, I'm not sure if you're familiar with it, is to provide predictable and patient funding. So I wonder, this short-term based relationship, which seems to be strong and being renewed every time, but still it seems to be an unpredictable stream of funding on a yearly basis. How do you see that?
Yeah, sorry. But I know that can be uncertain if you renew every year, but we don't right now or in the past. I remember I am part of the council 1 year and a half ago. The council is elected every 3 years. Yeah, just to say that. But in the past, TNC did this, but our organization doesn't manage money except this with our new council. I guess now we're building this trust. And it's sometimes can be because of that. You need to have this trust. And maybe we don't, my indigenous organization, they didn't trust NTC or they didn't trust us. And that can happen in many ways. We were talking about yesterday corruption, for example, the lack of transparency, or the mismanaged or funds, or maybe, what I was going to say, or maybe the agreement is not only about money, it's about other like works, or there are general agreements saying that, yeah, we're going to support the process, we're going to support maybe capacity building. That's all. It's not all the agreements that we have. Pakiru has at least 8 agreements with other international NGOs, just in case. Yes, yeah, I'm in charge of that, to review that. And yeah, and sometimes not all of those agreements are about money. No, money is not involved there. It's about what we're going to do, what we pretend to do in the future. That's why it's not that we can at least, you don't have that uncertainty if we are talking about big things. Yeah, no, it's not that. If we want to, for example, this program about the La Reserva Fluvial, yeah, that Gaby was talking about, this is a huge thing. And then that's why we have this management plan. And then we talk about the financial mechanism. For us, then we need to, again, sit at the table and talk about how we are going to work with this financial mechanism. Yeah, but what I'm saying is because we come from a strong or indigenous organization. Usually that doesn't happen every day. Like that depends also how strong you are to be able to sit at the table and promote this and lead this conversation with TNC, because what ask them is, hey, if we go to this financial mechanism, we are the ones that want to manage now the money. and you are going to help us build that path, maybe introduce us with some people that has the funds, but we are the ones. And yeah, of course, that's on our plan maybe later, but yeah.
Gabby, do you want to add anything?
Yes, maybe for implement the sustainable financing mechanism, TNC is facilitating some meetings with the government, no-governmental organizations, the private sector, and we are looking for obtain all the funding to implement conservation strategies, livelihood strategies, and to support both indigenous nations to improve their governance model.
Any other questions from the audience? Oh, one here.
Hello. My name's Lynn Porta. I'm kind of part two organizations, the North American Youth Parliament for Water, as well as an organization that supports readiness, sustainability, and resilience. So I have two questions, but for time, I'll just ask one, and then maybe you come back to me. So my first question to the panel is about the role of considering groundwater in your nature-based solutions case studies. We saw on the table that groundwater recharge was one of the example benefits, but it seemed like your case studies were more focused on surface water. So if you could maybe elaborate more on the consideration of groundwater and surface water systems being so tied together as they are, and how you consider these when you're planning your projects. Thank you.
Do you want me to talk to it? So Garija and I work together in GOAD. And that's very focused on groundwater and surface water quality. But the interesting piece about the landscape of GOAD is that the aquifers are very pockmarked around. And so that's why it makes community leadership even more important, because implementation within a specific village may only replete that particular aquifer. And so that's why it's important to have multiple villages working in a certain area, because without it, I mean, they quite literally manage their own water resource. There is nothing else that could potentially impact it aside from maybe their particular area, geographically, I would say. And so we do work on groundwater, just we didn't particularly highlight it in the case.
Can I just add?
Yeah, of course.
So the government of India also has a recent scheme to replenish the groundwater, and we are hoping to tie up with the government programs so that for the long-term sustainability, I think it's very important to leverage the existing programs of the government. Thanks.
Any other questions? One here. Oh.
Thanks. Hi, Kirsten Oliver from South Africa. I'm from an organization, an NGO called Wild Trust, and we're implementing a water fund in the Upper Tugela catchment in the Drakensberg Mountains in South Africa. And I have a question for the panel. So one of the things that I'm trying to get my head around in the feasibility for the water fund is that we've focused on two nature-based solutions. One is rangeland management and the other alien plant clearing. And there are obviously many other nature-based solutions, many other issues that need to be addressed in the communities. And I'd like to know from the community side, how do you deal with a water fund that comes in and kind of the focus is on only two nature-based solutions that are not necessarily addressing immediate social problems? How do you feel about that? How do you address that? Is it an issue? Yeah.
Yeah, that's a very good question. You know, all of our indigenous communities, I would say, and mine is probably not unique, do have social problems. We have community issues, community priorities that I recognize as being necessary to address. You know, your community health is tied to where you live. Healthy people, healthy water, education, social care, being able to care for your community. We've been doing that for years in our Pueblo communities, caring for each other. We are a people who look out after one another. So in my work, we're trying to teach or share that if you're protecting your environment, you're in some way addressing your community health needs, being able to provide a future for the next generations. Go and get an education, come back to your community and help your people. I think that just elevating that connection, that if you're addressing environmental problems, that you're hopefully also addressing community health problems, community needs in terms of a better place to live, sustainable places to live. And ways in which we're doing that is providing education to the school children, being able to provide environmental education at an early age, teaching the younger kids about the water, the air, the land, grazing lands. You speak of being able to address those that raise livestock or those that are growing crops, that they're all connected, that there is a place, there is a need to look at all aspects of what you do on your land, and there are ways to hopefully plan for how everyone is taken care of, how it addresses the needs and priorities within a community. I certainly know that the social problems in our Native communities here in the United States, not here, we're not there, need to be recognized. Bring those up front, and don't think there's a disconnect between health, education, welfare, and the environment. It's all connected together, and you start having conversations with community health representatives, the elderly, the older generations. Let them have a place at the table, as well as the younger generations, to be able to seek what their concerns and needs are. I know that the community health certainly is directly tied to our water funds. They're not disconnected. So that I hope that some of our resources that are given or raised in light of protecting water are also addressing and protecting and enhancing community health priorities and needs. Elevate those. Bring the community together, that we're going to hopefully address everything together and be able to identify ways in which that's done.
Deanna, do you have anything to add?
I guess for all of you, if you work for an NGO or you are the ones working for a fundraiser, I don't know, just to give you, we need to be smart with those funds. I know that it's hard. Some projects, the funding just comes from environment, just for the trees or the water or an animal, for example. Let's save the bear, okay. So we need to be smart about that. And yeah, I like that you brought the environmental education. We need to fund education in general, so more people like me or John can be here talking, because there is few of us that have that privilege as an indigenous. But anyway, so be smart about that. What we have done for those kind of projects, and I know TNC, and I like the points that you have in the middle. Looks like you already understood what what you have to do as an organization where you're working. Those points are key. What you have to do is be smart with the projects. And when we talk about education, for example, we said, yeah, of course, education, but not as a workshop. Let's try to connect the education to have a title, for example, a technician title. So in the long term, or the people that is learning about issue, they are going to have a degree. It doesn't have to be like an engineer, but there are other degrees, right? But it's recognized, and they are going to give in the long term, they can find a job, or maybe work for the same organization. So be smart about that. Yes, environmental education, but let's have this degree not as a workshop. That's one thing. Try to fund those projects. There are those kind of projects also. Second, the monitoring, for example, monitoring the water. Hire the people from the community, and if you don't see there is capacity building, of course, teach them and hire the people inside of the community to be the ones that are monitoring, and while they are doing that, capacity building again, so then at the long term, they can have this expertise and also make that process, like they can go and teach other communities. So see, you can be smart with the project. So don't think only about workshops. We are tired of workshops, just in case. Yeah. Yes, we need more actions. We need to see results and see that you have a commitment with the future of all of us. Indigenous people have been preserving our lands for generations. Where is your commitment? Because we already are doing our job. So be smart also about that. Yeah, I wanted just to share that.
Thank you, thank you. To be very pointy about it, I mean, sometimes it's very difficult as a challenge of conservation funding. Sometimes donors are just not interested in anything that's seen as out of scope, but it's on us to educate the donor, because if communities are central to the solution, then their needs should also be critical and important to the donor. So in any case, we have time for like a 30-second question and maybe a 30-second answer.
Hi, Laura Forney from the Stockholm Environment Institute in California. Hi. I'm the water program director, and we do a lot of work on water management. Source water protection is a very important action that usually water managers should take, and connecting with communities is key. Usually it's happening at the watershed level and not with a lot of inclusion of the communities, depending on the context. And the question to you is, how do you see, or how, is there any experience that you could share with us about the local actions and that local knowledge in terms of source water protection and the planning for the indigenous communities, and how those planning can connect to watershed level actions? So in the plans, the water plans that usually ministries develop, right, or different water managers, include those actions that have that diversity of scales and input, and also a mix of indigenous knowledge in that plan. That would be lovely for me to see, and I wanted just to see your perspective on that.
Do you all have anything?
Do you want to say something?
If you don't feel comfortable.
Okay. No, it's fine. But I don't know how is, for example, we in Ecuador, we have our planning tools are being recognized, and it's mandatory for the local government to include what is in our planning tools. We call them planes de vida, life plans. The name sounds beautiful, right? Life planes de vida. And also now we have los modelos de gobernanza, modelos de gestión y gobernanza territorial. Governance, territorial, and management model, okay? Mine is called Causaxacha, and I just forget it's there. If someone can bring it for me, please. Yeah, mine is called Causaxacha because it has the cosmovision of the Pastaza Quichua Nation that says that we recognize our land as a living thing. The forest is a living entity because we, indigenous people, we have a social relationship with nature, okay? So just keep that in mind. So since now we can push the local governments to, hey, you are going to do your land use plan, right? Don't forget to take a look on my plan and you have to implement it. What we're trying to promote now is to do this, to have these spaces where all of us, the government authorities, sit with us to plan together what we're going to do in the territories. So when you ask that question, I guess we need to move forward to recognize the tools that we already have. And if you are in a place that these indigenous people don't have a tool, let's start building that, because the knowledge is there. And I know that for Western thinking, you need sometimes us as indigenous translate this, as you mentioned, to a more technical stuff. I don't know why you need that. It's there, nature-based solution. I was like, what is that? Okay, yeah, so, yeah, I don't know why that happens. That's one of the things that we are promoting now. It's working, we're still working on there, but at least we have this idea. Sometimes when we talk about self-determination, in some states they think that we are the separatists. We are not. What we are asking is for a right that we already have, because we have land and we want to treat as equals, okay? That's one of the things. And one example can be well, you mentioned co-design. I said co-governance. Okay, let's just, and what we're doing, yesterday I was talking with John about this. Hey, for centuries, Western thinking, Western knowledge has been the way that everyone has been following. We as indigenous have led you, or try your way, in the Western way. Why don't try the indigenous way? Maybe the answer is there. We don't own the truth. Nobody owns the truth. But why we don't change the mindset and let's try this way? And maybe it's here in these planning tools, in these indigenous planning tools, the knowledge is there or the answer can be there. But let's try to, these scientists, if you do the same thing all over again, you're crazy.
Definition of insanity?
The definition of insanity. Just saying. Just saying.
I think that's perfect.
I guess I don't know if I answer your question. Okay, thank you. Excuse me? We just built our website, Pakiru. Can you just, this is my organization, Pakiru. We built our website. I'm gonna request soon to be uploaded, but we're working in communication. Communication is key, and at least with 10C, they understood that. So we said that we need a stronger indigenous organization, right? So communication is one of the plans that we're also working on. We're going to start our radio, so to share all this knowledge in our communities, because we don't have, some communities don't have internet, we're very, very far. So radio is key, so we're going to spread this, my causa exacta belief, and also the website for everyone of you, NGOs, or can see and what we're doing and what we have. And I guess for all the other indigenous organizations that are here, yeah, we need to start focusing. Also communication helps a lot to spread the word of the work what we already have been doing. It looks like you need more proof. Don't look for more proofs, it's there. So just look for our territories and how well they are, they are.
Perfect. I think we should leave it at that. Let's all try the indigenous way. All right, thank you guys.